It's officially a game day for the Carolina Hurricanes, which means it's game on for game 2.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a game day and Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, about a show that talks everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I am your host, Zach Martin. I am the Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers. I'm also the writer at the Calder Times, going over some AHL stuff on that side of things. I am also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast. Of course, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Excited to bring you a game day / Tuesday edition of the show, which we're going to be going over the sights and sounds from practice from Monday. And then also going to be previewing today's game for game 2, what we could hopefully expect going into that game to hopefully see a split series going back to Raleigh on Thursday. And also going to talk about some news and notes over the past day or so coming in from Monday, just anything that kind of popped up that, just note and newsworthy and all that good stuff. But before we jump into everything that is a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, got to talk about today's sponsor, Monopoly Go. Game off, we got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. So like I said, the Carolina Hurricanes practiced on Monday and just, looking to see what, if there was any different line changes and stuff like that, and kind of hearing from head coach Rod Brind'Amour and getting his thoughts after game 1 and how the team is preparing to get ready for tonight's game for game 2 in New York. Rod Brind'Amour said following today's practice, we understand where we lost the game. We've got to be better in some areas, but we did some really good things too and can't be overlooked. We've got to build on them. It's one game. We certainly don't want it to bleed into 2, so we've got to be that much better tomorrow. And when you really look at the whole game, Rod Brind'Amour is right. I mean, there were some things that they did better on, over the whole stretch of game 1. They didn't really give up. They were able to string themselves together along to, not really quit, get back within the game, where they get within a single goal once already with Amari Nietzsche's goal, got back down by 2, but then Seth Jarvis scored again and get them back within 1 twice. So it's one of those things where the Hurricanes were able to claw back in multiple times throughout the whole game. And it's one of those things where, you can build on that. You can build on the no-quit mentality that we've seen from the Hurricanes all playoffs. You saw that in round 1 against the Islanders. Big game, big comeback in game 2. Game 5, they were up. Islanders tied it and then came out and scored 2 goals pretty quick and won the game. So the Hurricanes played a lot of comebacks, forced a lot of it. Even game 4, they were down, came back and forced overtime and stuff like that. So that it's one of those things where the Hurricanes can play their game to where they're always finding a way to claw themselves back in and make it to where you can't count them out. And that's the thing that you're looking at for the Hurricanes. And that's something Rod Brind'Amour talked about, is the fact that, despite, a lot giving up, penalties early in the game, didn't really commit any more for the rest of the game as well. But then, unfortunately, you were saddled with giving up those 2 power play goals. But over time, the Hurricanes kind of stayed a more disciplined type of game, weren't committing a whole lot of penalties and stuff like that, and were able to just, like I said, claw their way back in. And that's what Rod Brind'Amour is right about, is the fact that there was no quit in the team. They as the game progressed, they got back into Carolina Hurricanes hockey, where you saw for the first 10 minutes of the game, it was more of like they were trying to play in the Rangers type of way and had to play a lot of catch up. And that's something you can't do. You can't fault to the other team's game and then you're playing chase the entire time. You have to stick to your game plan and something that's worked. And what worked for the Hurricanes was the fact that, strong forecheck, great back checking, great communication, great defense. And that's what you saw against the Islanders. And unfortunately in game one, early deficit, and then they had to call their way back. But like I said, as you saw the game progress, they got better and better as the game went on and stuff like that. Now it's, where they lost it. I talked about it on Monday's show. It was special teams. And I even wrote about it for the hockey writers too. It's one of those things where special teams dug them a hole early and really couldn't claw back out of it. And unfortunately, you can't go 0 for 5. And that's one of the things where that's something that, Rod Brind'Amour and his staff with Jeff Daniels on the power play and even talking to Tim Gleason, who's, defense and all that. You have to look at it as, where you fell short on, and it was special teams, and you can't do that. You can't give the Rangers opportunities. You can't have defensive breakdowns and let them score because they are a dangerous power play team. They have the third best power play in the entire league during the regular season. And, when you get that opportunity, yes, the Rangers had the third best penalty kill, but you had the second best power play. So you have to make the chance of those opportunities, and you really can't do anything when you go over 5, technically over 4 because of that penalty from Svechnikov, but you really look at it on paper, it's still over 5. So you have to take advantage of those opportunities, and that's things that the Hurricanes need to focus on is working to get in their power play better and making sure that they're putting themselves in that great opportunity to capitalize on those man advantage opportunities. And that's something that, they're going to work on. But like I said, too, Rod Brind'Amour said there were some things that worked really well for them as the game progressed. They got more into their game. But now instead of having a slow start like you did in game 1 and like you do you have to come out strong in game 2. And you got to make sure that you're firing on all cylinders and getting ready to go, because the last thing you want to do is go down 0-2 and you're coming back to Raleigh on Thursday night and you're trying to claw your back into a series with a team that's got a lot of momentum, who's won 5 straight now coming into the playoffs. So you kind of need to stop the bleeding, like Rod said. Got to stop the bleeding, come out for game 2 and play your game. And that's what the Hurricanes need to do. And, of course, we'll talk about more about that in the second segment. But he's right. You got to focus on stuff like that. And that's just one of the things where you got to know, you got to see what you fell short on, but also grow on the stuff that worked out. And, don't overlook the goods as well. Like, you got to take the positives and the negatives, especially after a game like that. And, from practice, Rod Brind'Amour always does it with his guys. They always come out learning from what they did the night before or the game before and work at it and get better. And that's Rod Brind'Amour said at the beginning of the season. Every day you got to get 1% better. You got to go 0 for 1 that day. And that's the mentality that the Hurricanes are going to have to do coming into game 2. So in terms of practice overall, the team was in Newark at the Prudential Center to get ready for, practicing and getting ready for game 2 today on Tuesday night. And it was a full team practice ahead of the game on Monday. And the fact that, from Walt Ruff, everyone was accounted for in that practice, even Frederick Anderson. So they had Freddie on one side, and they also had, Pierre Kachekov and Spencer Martin. So, they were all working as part of the skate in that practice. So you kind of see all 3 goalies getting through the reps and stuff like that. We'll talk about more in segment 2 about who the possible starter could be for the Hurricanes in that game. And just looking at the overall, how the lines looked in the defensive pairings. So if you look at the first line from practice, it was Jake Gensel, Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, then you had Jordan Martinook, Jack Drury, Martin Niches is your second line, with Teuvo Teravainen, Jordan Stahl, and Seth Jarvis is the third line. And then you had Brendan Lemieux kind of like mix and mingle within that group, throughout practice. And then you had Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Evgeny Kuznetsov, and Stefan Nason, with Max Comtois, sliding in here and there as well with that group, just like Brendan Lemieux. And you look at the defensive cores, you kind of run through your 4 defensive pairings of, Jacob Slavin, Brent Burns together on the top pair, Brady Shea, Tony DeAngelo is your second, Dmitry Orlov, Jalen Chatfield is your third pair. And then in your fourth pair, and your extras that you're kind of just rolling in throughout that, it's Dylan Coghlan and Scott Morrow. So looking at it on this type of thing, there was no changes in terms of how the lines looked. And, that's something that it makes you wonder, are the Hurricanes going to run with that same group? And like I said, we'll dive more into that in the second segment, but just looking at it from right away, you see all 3 goalies are present, even with Freddie Anderson playing, Sunday afternoon, he's there for full practice with the other goaltenders as well, working with Paul Schellfelder and stuff like that. So you're kind of seeing, all the goalies getting their reps. you see all the forward core guys are together, same defensive pairings and stuff like that. And of course, you've got your healthy scratch extras coming in to rotate with the team as well. Because right now your extras are Brind'Amour, Max Comtois, and Coughlin and Morrow, and you also got Spencer Martin. So those are like your extra guys right now and stuff like that. Because with being with the playoffs, it doesn't really, as long as you're fitting within the contract, of the cap space, you can run with a certain number of guys. And you're seeing that with Lemieux and Comtois for the forward core. And then defense, you got that extra pair of Coughlin and Morrow. And, right now, Brett Pesce didn't join the team on the trip. So, he's not going to be playing a game 2. Jesper Foss is we're still probably 2 weeks away from knowing what's going on with him. So this is kind of what you're looking at right now. And that's what it makes it very, very interesting going into game 2 tonight. With just looking at it right now, before we even dive into the preview of game 2, it's just that's where you're looking at in terms on what Ruff tweeted out, what the Hurricanes are running for at practice from Newark on Monday. And we will get into more of a deep dive into previewing game 2 here in a second on a game day / Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Napoli Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like we said at the end of segment 1, now we're going to dive into more of a preview of game 2. And just like looking back over the lines real quick that we saw from practice, Gensel, Aho, Svechnikov, Martinook, Jerry Nietzsche, Teravainen, Stolarz-Jarvis with Brendan Lemieux sliding in, Kotkaniemi, Kuznetsov, Nason with Comtois sliding in there, and then Slavin Burns, Shane DeAngelo, Orlov Chatfield, Coughlin Morrow, and then of course you got your 3 goalies of Frederick Anderson, Pierre Kachekov, and Spencer Martin. Now, for me, it's one of those things where those lines did get better as the game went on, but at the same time, I feel like the line of Drury, Kuznetsov, Nason did pretty well, and I understand you want Jack Drury in there to play as a good second-line center. I can see why they're doing that, and it makes sense. But I feel like, too, it's one of those things where you want to see a line of Martinook, Stolarz-Jarvis back to because you saw how good those 3 were together throughout the regular season. If you want to try to run it with Jarvis with Jordan Staal, I think if you put the J line back together, I think you might be cooking a little bit more there and stuff like that, and you get more chances. And I know, Martin Nietzsche is the way he plays his game. He's got the speed. He tries. He's got good hands and stuff like that too. And Jack Drury does his thing. But for me, it's like you kind of want to have a guy like Teuvo Teravainen who's also setting those guys up as well. And I think that's kind of where you might want to swap Martinook and Teravainen and stuff like that, just to be able to get the J line back together and have those 3 run together as well. And I mean, too, it's like you really don't want to, split, Jack Drury and Steph Nason, because everyone knows that those 2 play really well together. You saw it through the regular season. You even saw it in, round 1 against the Islanders. So I can see where Rod Brind'Amour really wants to try to run with, Drew's your second-line center with Martin Nietzsche and Jordan Martinook. Like, it makes sense to see that, but at the same time, it's kind of like you saw certain lines work together in the regular season and even in round 1. And I think, for me, it's like you got to have that J line back together. You got to have the Jordans and Seth Jarvis. It just worked. I feel like you get more chemistry and more production out of those guys, and the fact that you have a good defensive center like Jordan Stahl there doing his thing. You've got Jordan Martinook who can crash the net, played really great defense and do a lot of those board battles, and even the same thing for Seth Jarvis. His 200-foot game has gotten so much better since last season. We saw it this year, career season out of him. He's leading the team in the playoffs right now in terms of points, and scored another goal, got his 4th goal of the playoffs back on Sundays. He leads the team in goals, and it's just you have him on that line with those two guys where he's got the speed. He's not afraid to throw a body. He's not afraid to get in the corners, and he's not afraid to get to net front and use his speed to bar his way in there. He can barge his way to the net. And that's something you can see with those 3 guys and why it works so well for them. So I think that, you kind of want to have a guy like Teravainen who can set those guys up in terms of passes, but I feel like Teravainen would be he'd be better on the second line with Drury and Nietzsche, because Nietzsche does a lot of stick handling and trying, dipsy doodle his way through the zone and stuff like that. And it's not a negative thing. It's just how he is. He's got good stick handling. He's got the speed and stuff like that. And Jack Drury is a good facilitator. He wins a lot of faceoffs. He's a guy that you want to use a lot too in terms of the faceoff dot. And I think if you put Teravainen with him, he's a guy who can set the plays up well and still be able to score. So I think those 3 would be almost better together on the line. And to be fair, I mean, Kotkaniemi, Kuznetsov, and Nason has been a good line too. Like, could you swap Drury and Kotkaniemi? Possibly, yes. But I think KK's done specifically well with Kuzi and Nason. Kotkaniemi throughout the playoffs has thrown his body a lot more. He's been setting up guys and stuff like that. And, he's played a lot more of a defensive game. And I think that works well with a guy like Kuznetsov, who, has really good stick handling as well, but he's a good facilitator of the puck as a power forward center, as your 4C, which, I think any team would kill to have a guy like Kuzi as your 4th line center, just making a tad above $3 million, but he's doing it really well doing it. And of course, what you got out of Steph Nason, Mr. Net front presence himself. He always goes to the front and net, always gets those greasy goals, always get the rebounds and stuff like that. Like, he's got 3 goals in the playoffs in 6 games for the Hurricanes this year in the playoffs, and it's all been in front of the net, screens or getting rebounds or stuff like that, or picking up loose change. That's just how he plays. So I think those 3 together will work fine. I think if you put Martinook back with Jordan Stahl and Seth Jarvis, I think you've got that chemistry that we saw for most of the regular season and we kind of saw at the back end of round 1. And then you just get Teravainen and Drury Nations together. Those 3 can complement each other so well for the most part. And then, you got to hope the big boys of Jake Gensel, Sebastian Aho, and Andrei Svechnikov really come out flying in this game. Andre kind of had a tough game with a couple, getting in the box a couple of times. Sebastian Aho did get 2 assists in the game. He got a quiet 2 assists in game 1. You're hoping to see a little bit more out of him. And you got to hope for Jake Gensel too. Like, Jake Gensel hasn't scored a goal with the goalie in net. So you kind of have to hope that it's one of those things where, you get a guy like him who's just a tad under a point per game in the playoffs, and you hope that he finds the score sheet in terms of with the goalie in the net, starts scoring a little bit more of the goals, getting all those assists that we saw. He got 25 points in 17 games for the Hurricanes in the regular season. And you hope that that's the kind of thing that turns around, because, like I said, you don't want to go into this game slow. You don't want to give the Rangers the momentum. And the thing is, you don't want to give the Rangers a 2-0 series lead going back into Raleigh on Thursday. If you're down 2-0, that it could be a tough stretch. It could be a tough battle. Now, I know the Hurricanes in the past have come back in series and stuff like that, but for a team like the Rangers, I just don't believe you could go down like that. 2-0, you're coming home. Yes, you got the home crowd back on your side, but you're giving so much momentum to a Rangers team that has right now won 5 straight games in the playoffs. Swept the Capitals in the first round. They took game 1 against you. It was 4-3. A couple times the Hurricanes did come back. They did tie it pretty quickly after, Mika Zibanejad scored, then Jacob Slavin scored a minute later. And you had 2 goals where you came back within 1, but fell short. But that you don't give that type of momentum to the Rangers going into game 3. Like, honestly, game 2, you got to play your game for 60 minutes, come out flying. Don't, like, the second period, all first round, kill the Hurricanes against the Islanders. And that's against them. Like, you don't want to do that against the Rangers. Yes, they played a whole lot better second period on Sunday afternoon. No goals happened, so that's a good thing. But it's one of those things where you have to, like I said, stick to your game, play 60 minutes of Hurricanes hockey, and you have to, if you get if you get that extra man, if you get more man advantage opportunities, you got to capitalize on them. I know it's so cliche. I know it's so easy to say, but it's the truth though. And, I've come with this, people who've been listening for the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about this new kind of like special teams plus minus. The Hurricanes went a -7 on Sunday, gave up 5, went 0 for 5 on the power play and gave up 2 power play goals. You went 0 for 2 on the PK and 0 for 5 on the power play. Technically, you were a -7 on special teams. And, you can't have that. So you have to take the opportunities. And I think that's where the Hurricanes really need to cut, play well on. Is special teams has to get so much better. You've got to play your game for a whole 60 minutes, and you've got to get out of that game with a win to split it to come back to Carolina, because you don't want to go down 2-0 and give them all the momentum going up, having them have 6 straight wins and they win both their games on home ice. Now you got to come back home and you got to take 2. For me, you have to split this game. And in terms of net, I love Freddie. He's been playing, obviously, 4 goals in Sunday's game was the most he's given up all playoffs in a single game. But I think, it's like I think it's time to give him some rest. He's played every single game for the Hurricanes in the playoffs. He's played 6 games now. And Piotr hasn't been on the ice as a starting goalie since, the Chicago game, the second to last game of the season back on April 14th. And now you're talking coming into tonight's game, you're talking 3 weeks and 2 days since he's been on the ice as a starting goalie. So, I would love to have Freddie back in. I think they could turn to him because, he has been playing well in the playoffs. But I think it might be time to give Piotr a shot just to, at least get him back in the flow and not have him keep sitting. Because he is, like I said, he hasn't played in over 3 weeks and now technically 2 days. So at this point, it's kind of like you can't let your backup get rusty. Because if Freddie starts getting more tired and starts, not being, the Freddie Anderson that we saw in round 1, you got to know that you can go back to Piotr. I mean, we all know that you can go to Piotr at any time and he's going to do his thing. But it's also like you don't want to have him sit for so long, and he's already been sitting for 3 weeks. You don't want to make it worse, and then compounds, and then he's really out of his game. So I think for me, I could see them going either way. But if it was me, I go Peter Kochetkov, just the fact to give Freddie extra rest. Maybe throw him in for game 3, depending on how Piotr does in game 2. But I think it's time for Piotr to come in the net, do his thing, not, like I said, knock the little bit of whatever rust he's got on him, or just get him back into playoff mode, because he hasn't, like I said, he hasn't played in the playoffs yet. So, and I know you don't really want to do that against the Rangers, but I think it's kind of time to throw him in there and just see what he can do. All that good stuff. But I don't know. I guess we'll see. That's kind of like where I'm thinking at in terms of how game 2 is going to be in terms of what your potential starter is. Where I kind of wonder what the lines look like, what I would probably go with the lines. Of course, I'm not Rod Brind'Amour. I trust Rod. I mean, in Rod we trust. But for me, it's like you can't, if he runs with these lines, then that's the lines that we get from practice going into game 2. But we kind of know some of the chemistry that we've seen in the regular season. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what the Hurricanes do in that aspect. So we are going to talk about some news and notes that have happened on Monday, just trying to catch up on everything that has happened in terms of anything off the ice for the Carolina Hurricanes as well. And we'll get to that here in a second on a Tuesday/game day edition of Locked On Hurricanes. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to a segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So, going to just go through some, no's and newts real quick that, that came out on Monday afternoon, just to kind of, catch up with everyone that hasn't seen it yet, just, that way everyone knows what's going on in terms of all the off-ice stuff with your Carolina Hurricanes. So the NHL has announced, we already know what's going to happen for Game 3 in terms of when that start time is in Carolina. About I'll refresh everyone here in a second. But the NHL has also released the news of the start time for Game 4 this Saturday on May 11th. So the game on Thursday, we'll be back at PNC Arena. It will be on TNT, Max, and True TV along with Sportsnet. That is going to be a 7 p.m. puck drop at PNC Arena. So, make sure to get there, 4 o'clock when the gates open and stuff like that if you're going to be there for Game 3. Like I said, Thursday's game is a 7 p.m. puck drop. And if you're not able to make it, it's going to be on TNT, Max, True TV, and Sportsnet, and also the CBC if you're in Canada. And, of course, it's always going to be on 99.9 The Fan, where you're going to have Mike Maniscalco and Chip Tracy doing the radio side of things. And, of course, unfortunately, they're not back on the TV. But if you do want to listen to the guys cover the game, do their play-by-play while you're watching on TV, you can do that too. Mute the TV, turn on 99.9, and listen to Mike and Trip as always. And if you haven't listened to Canes Cast, I know Shane Willis has said he is on WRAL for post-game stuff as well after the games so make sure to go check that out for post-game if you want to listen to Shane Willis do his thing for, I think he says about 30 minutes to an hour. So make sure to go check that out. And like I said, so for Saturday for Game 4 is a 7 p.m. puck drop. That's going to be on TNT, Max, and True TV again. And it's also going to be part of Sportsnet and the CBC up in Canada, just like for Game 3. And like I said, same thing for the radio side, 99.9 The Fan for Mike and Trip, and of course WRAL for Shane Willis to listen to him post-game. So that's kind of like the updated time slots and stuff like that, when the game's going to start. Both games at 7 p.m. TV pretty much can be the same for both games and stuff like that. So if you're looking for a place to watch it, there you go. Listen to it. Like I said, it's always 99.9 The Fan and stuff like that. So that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of Game 3 and Game 4 of where to watch, where to listen, and what times as well. And the other thing that came out for the Carolina Hurricanes is that they actually signed another prospect to a 3-year entry-level contract. And this one is with Charles Alexis Legault. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correct. But they on Monday after they did sign him a 3-year entry-level contract where he will receive $775,000 if he plays in the AHL for the 2024-25 season. And then he's going to be able to get $832,500 for the 25-26 season, and that goes up to $855,000 for the 2026-27 season. And then if he plays for all 3 of those seasons, if he plays in the American Hockey League with now the known affiliate of the Chicago Wolves, which is now, we all know it's official, thanks to Andrew Rinaldi coming on for last Friday's show. If he plays in the American Hockey League with the Chicago Wolves, that'd be $82,500, and that's what Legault would be getting if he played down there. And then he also did get a signing bonus of $285,000 from the Hurricanes as well. And even asked about, Legault himself, Don Waddell did say this about their new recent signing. Charles Alexis is a physical defenseman who uses his size well. He made great strides in his offensive game this season, and we think he's ready to continue his development at the professional level. Now, Charles Alexis Legault is 20 years old. He did post up 24 points in 39 games with Quinnipiac for the 23-24 season. He had 9 goals and 50 assists, and he actually led all of the Bobcats in goals this season with those 9. So in terms of how he was, he had a plus minus of 30. He had a plus 36, which currently led all of the highest mark among all D1 skaters this season. So the fact he had a plus 36 is really, really huge in 39 games. And also for the fact that in terms of his entire, career at Quinnipiac, he had 33 points, 11 goals, 22 assists in 79 games over those 2 seasons. Of course, he helped that team win the national title in 22 and 23. And going even further back, he did play in the BCHO, or the British Columbia Hockey League, where he registered 18 points in 36 games with West Kelowna in 21-22 and all that good stuff. And he is a 5th round, 139th overall pick by the Hurricanes in the 2023 NHL draft. So that'll wrap up the Tuesday game day episode of Locked On Hurricanes. Like as always, thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day. I hope everyone really enjoyed the show. If you want to follow me on social media, go check me out at OneTrueZach on Twitter, or you can also check out the podcast at Ella_Hurricanes. If you click the link tree in my bio, you'll find where you can find my articles at the Hockey Writers, also at the Calder Times, and then you find where to listen and watch on YouTube for my other podcast, the Surgecast. And you'll also find the links to the of this podcast on local podcast platforms, and check out the YouTube side of things as well on here. And if you do check out the YouTube of this podcast, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Also hit the thumbs up button as well. I greatly appreciate it. Leave me, in the comments below, leave me who you would want to see start tonight in Game 2 for the Hurricanes if you want to see Anderson or Petr Chekhov. So make sure to do that. And make sure to share this podcast and share the YouTube channel with all their Caniacs So hopefully they become everydayers as well, because if we get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, I might just do something really cool for you guys. But I hope everyone has a great rest of their Tuesday. I hope everyone enjoys, watching Game 2 tonight for the Hurricanes against New York Rangers. Hopefully, crossing fingers, they split this series up and go back 1-1 to Carolina on Thursday. But like I said, hope everyone's a great rest of your day. And as always, let's go Canes.